My DNA test showed 100% match, but it wasn't my child. My name is Sarah, and what I'm about to tell you changed my life forever. It all started with a simple Christmas gift, a DNA test from my daughter Emily. She said it would help us learn more about our roots for her school genealogy project. I never thought that saliva in a plastic tube could shatter everything I believed about my life for 45 years. I always knew I was adopted. My parents, Tom and Martha Johnson, never hid it from me. They told me my biological mother was very young and couldn't take care of me. I grew up in a loving family in a small Ohio town, and honestly, I never really had much interest in finding my biological parents. Why would I? I had a wonderful family. But there was always something, this strange feeling of incompleteness. I can't explain it. Sometimes, lying in bed, I felt like someone should be next to me. As a child, I constantly turned around, thinking someone was walking behind me. Mom said I just had an active imagination. In school, I had this weird habit. I always bought 2 identical items, 2 pens, 2 notebooks, 2 rulers. Teachers thought I was just very organized, but actually I felt the need to have a backup set, as if for someone else. When I turned 25, I married David. We met in college where I was studying education. He was so kind and patient, exactly what I needed. 3 years later, Emily was born. She was my light, my everything. But even after marriage and Emily's birth, that strange feeling of incompleteness didn't disappear. Sometimes I'd wake up at night feeling like I've forgotten something important. David suggested I see a therapist, but I always brushed it off. What could I say? That I felt incomplete? That it seemed like half of me was missing? Years went by. Emily grew into a smart, beautiful girl. She entered house school and became fascinated with family history. For Christmas, she gave me a DNA test. I remember that day like it was yesterday. It was the morning of December 25th. Snow was falling outside. We were sitting by the Christmas tree, and Emily handed me a beautifully wrapped box. She explained this would help us learn more about our family for her school project. Imagined we might be descendants of royalty or Vikings. I laughed and agreed. The procedure was simple: spit in a tube and mail it off. The company promised results in 4 to 6 weeks. Honestly, I forgot about that test. The holidays passed, life returned to its usual rhythm. Work at the elementary school, household chores, helping Emily with her studies. David got a promotion at his construction company, and we were planning a summer vacation to California. Exactly 5 weeks after Christmas, I received an email with the subject line, "Your DNA results are ready." I opened it during lunch break at school, sitting in the teacher's lounge drinking coffee. It was the last Sunday of January. First, I looked through the ancestry information. Nothing surprising. European roots, some Irish blood, a bit of Scandinavian genes. But then I saw the section, Close Relatives, and my heart stopped. On the screen it read, Lisa Rose Miller, 100% DNA match. Probable relationship, identical twin. Identical twin? That's impossible. I'm an only child. My parents would never. They would have told me if I had a twin sister, right? My hands shook as I clicked on Lisa's profile. There was no photo, just basic information. Female, 45 years old, lives in Columbus, Ohio. Columbus, that's only 20 miles from my town. I closed the laptop and tried to focus on work, but couldn't. Thoughts swirled in my head like a whirlwind. For the rest of the day, I was in a fog. The kids in my class asked if everything was okay. That evening, I didn't tell David or Emily anything. I needed to figure everything out first. After dinner, I locked myself in the study and reopened the test results. 100% match meant only one thing. I had an identical twin sister. But how is this possible? Why had my parents never told me about this? I found Lisa's contact information in the system. She had an email address listed. I spent 2 hours composing a message, deleting it, and composing again. What do you write in such a situation? Finally, I wrote simply, "Hi Lisa, my name is Sarah Johnson. According to DNA test results, we have a 100% match. I would be very grateful if we could talk." I sent the message at 11:47 p.m. and didn't sleep all night. The reply came the next morning at 6:23. I remember the exact time because I'd been checking my email every 5 minutes since waking up. Lisa wrote that she didn't sleep all night after my message. She also received test results last week and was shocked by the 100% match. She was also 45, and she was also adopted. She suggested we meet. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it would jump out of my chest. We agreed to meet at a cafe in downtown Columbus the next day. I didn't tell David the truth, just said I was going to town on business. I don't know why, but I needed to see her first myself, to understand what was happening. The drive to Columbus took 30 minutes, but felt like an eternity. I parked at the Starbucks on High Street at 2:45. We'd agreed to meet at 3 o'clock. I sat in my car, watching the cafe entrance. My imagination painted thousands of pictures of what my supposed twin sister might look like. Would she look like me? Would she have the same brown hair? The same green eyes? At 2:59, a blue Honda Civic pulled up to the cafe. A woman got out and I almost fainted. It was like looking in a mirror. Not just similar, absolutely identical. The same hair, the same walk, the same expression of nervousness on her face. Lisa saw me through the cafe window and froze. We looked at each other for several seconds, unable to believe what was happening. When I entered the cafe, Lisa was already sitting at a corner table. She stood up when she saw me, and we both started crying right there in the middle of the crowded cafe. We didn't hug, didn't speak, just stood and cried, looking at each other. Finally, we sat down. For the first few minutes, we talked simultaneously, then laughed about it, then cried again. It was surreal. Lisa told me her story. She grew up with the Miller family in Columbus. Also an only child, also always felt some kind of emptiness. She also became a teacher, worked at a middle school, taught English. But the most amazing thing, we both did DNA tests for the same reason. Our daughters were in high school studying genealogy. Lisa received her test from her daughter Jessica for Valentine's Day. I have a 17-year-old daughter named Emily. Lisa also has a 17-year-old daughter, Jessica. We took out our phones and showed each other pictures of our daughters. I nearly choked. Emily and Jessica weren't just similar, they could have been twins. The same dark hair, the same eye shape, the same smile. We sat in that cafe for 4 hours, compared childhood photos, school pictures, family moments. The coincidences were incredible. We both broke our left arms at age 7. We both feared spiders, but loved thunderstorms. We both hated carrots, but loved broccoli. We even got married in the same year. But what shocked me most was that we'd been in the same places countless times. Lisa worked in a school district that bordered mine. We'd both attended the same education conferences For the past 15 years, she remembered a woman in a red coat at a conference 3 years ago who seemed familiar. That was me. And I remembered a woman with exactly the same hair who sat 2 rows away from me. That was her. By evening, we both understood that we needed to talk to our adoptive parents, but we were scared. What if they knew and had been hiding it? What if this would destroy our relationships with our families? Lisa suggested we first find the adoption agency. Maybe they had records. We only knew what was listed on our birth certificates. We were both born September 15th, 1979, at Mount Carmel Hospital in Columbus. The next day, I called in sick, officially due to a migraine. Actually, I was going to meet Lisa so we could go to the hospital together. At the hospital archives, we were told that birth records could only be obtained with court permission or medical necessity. But a friendly nurse named Dorothy, who'd worked there for 40 years, looked at us carefully and quietly said she remembered our case. Twins, born almost simultaneously. The mother was just a girl, about 16. Very sad story. Dorothy couldn't give us official information, but she remembered that the children were taken by Family Bridges agency. That adoption agency still existed. At Family Bridges, we were met by an elderly woman named Barbara Thompson. She'd been a social worker for 30 years. When we explained the situation and showed our DNA test results, her face became very serious. She remembered our case. It was one of the most difficult situations in her career. Barbara told us the truth that turned our world upside down. Our biological mother's name was Rosemary Clark. She was only 16 when she got pregnant. The baby's father, a 17-year-old boy named Michael, died in a car accident a month before our birth. Rosemary had no family who could help. She was living in a home for unwed mothers. Rosemary desperately wanted to keep us, but when twins were born, she realized she couldn't physically or financially handle 2 babies. The decision to give us up for adoption was incredibly difficult for her. We were separated because at that time there was a theory that twins were better separated. It was believed they could develop individuality that way, wouldn't depend on each other. Now we know it was a mistake, but then they thought they were doing the right thing. Our adoptive parents didn't know about the existence of twins. The agency didn't tell adoptive families about this, thinking it might complicate the adoption process and adaptation. I felt anger rising in my chest. For 45 years, I'd lived with a feeling of incompleteness, and all this time, I had a sister 20 miles away. 45 years, we could have known each other, grown up together, supported each other. Rosemary took the separation from us very hard. She asked to keep at least 1 child, but they explained it was impossible. After the adoption, she came to the agency for several years, asking how we were doing. Then she disappeared. They lost contact with her. Barbara gave us copies of documents she could provide by law. Not much information, but enough to start searching. That evening, I finally told David the truth. He was shocked, but supported me. Emily was thrilled about having an aunt and cousin she didn't know about. She said it was like a movie and we should invite them to dinner. The following weekend, Lisa came to us with her husband, Robert, and daughter, Jessica. When Emily and Jessica met, they too were amazed by the resemblance. They could have been sisters. During dinner, Lisa and I told childhood stories, and the coincidences continued to amaze. At age 7, we both fell off our bikes and broke our left arms. On the same day, July 15th, 1986. At 13, we both started playing piano. At 15, we both fell in love with our English teachers. A month after the family dinner, we found Rosemary. A private detective Lisa hired discovered she was living in a nursing home in Akron. The staff said she had good days when her memory was clear. I can't describe the emotions I felt driving to the nursing home. Fear, excitement, anger, hope. Everything mixed into a lump in my throat. Rosemary was sitting in a chair by the window in the common room. She was a small, fragile woman with gray hair and tired eyes. When the nurse told her visitors had come, she looked up and saw us. Her expression changed instantly. First surprise, then shock, then incredible joy. She whispered that her little girls had returned. We sat next to her, and Rosemary extended trembling hands to touch our faces. She said she knew that someday we would find each other, and had prayed for it every day for 45 years. For the next 2 hours, Rosemary told us her story about how she was completely alone when we were born, about how agonizing it was to decide to give us up for adoption, about how she begged the agency not to separate us, but was told it was impossible. Few people wanted to adopt twins. She told us she held us both before giving us up. I was calm, but Lisa cried constantly, as if she knew something was wrong. Rosemary kissed us and promised that someday we would meet again. Rosemary told us that after the adoption, she tried to forget us and move on. She finished school, went to college, worked as a nurse. But she never married or had other children. She couldn't. Every time she saw twins on the street, her heart broke. She thought about us every day. Rosemary tried to find us through the agency, but was told contact was only possible if we wanted to meet. She left her coordinates in case we sought our biological parents, but we never searched. In recent years, the disease began taking her memory, but she told us something I'll never forget. Even when she forgets her name, she remembers our little faces. That's the only thing the disease can't take from her. We began visiting Rosemary regularly. On good days, she told us about our father Michael, showed us his photos. He was a handsome young man with a kind face. Rosemary had kept some of his things all these years: the leather jacket, letters he wrote to her. Rosemary kept a box of baby items: our hospital bracelets, tiny socks, the blanket we were wrapped in at the hospital. At the very bottom of the box was an old envelope labeled "For my girls." Inside was a letter written in our mother's handwriting and 2 small gold chains with heart-shaped pendants. In the letter, Rosemary wrote, "My dear daughters, if you're reading this, it means you found each other. These chains belong to my mother, your grandmother, whom you'll never know. Once this was one heart, but I divided it into 2 parts, one for each of you. Wear them and remember that wherever you are, you'll always be parts of one whole. I love you more than life, Mom." We put on the chains right there in Rosemary's room. When we brought the 2 pendants together, they formed a perfect heart with the engraving, "Forever Connected." Rosemary had kept this letter and chains for 45 years, hoping she could give them to us someday. A few months after our reunion, something happened that finally showed how deep our connection was. Emily decided to delve deeper into genealogical research and found information about our father, Michael's family. It turned out he had a brother, Tommy, who lived in Los Angeles. When Emily contacted Tommy through social media, he was amazed. He told us he'd always suspected our existence, But after Michael's death, their parents were consumed with grief and didn't want to know anything about their son's pregnant girlfriend. Michael had shown Tommy the ultrasound and was so proud he was having twins. He'd already chosen names, Sarah and Lisa. It turned out our father not only knew about us, but had chosen our names before birth. All these years, we'd carried names given by a father we'd never seen. Tommy sent us a box of Michael's belongings, his diary, letters to Rosemary, photographs. The diary had many entries about us. Rosemary told him she could feel the twins kicking, and he couldn't wait to put his hands on her belly and feel his children. They chose names, and Rosemary liked Sarah and Lisa. He wrote that these were beautiful names for beautiful girls. Michael bought a crib, and the salesman said he'd need 2, but he said he'd take 1 for now. He wanted to assemble the second one himself when the girls were born. Reading these entries was unbearably painful. Our father had waited for us so much, prepared so much for our birth. By the end of our first year of reunion, Rosemary's condition worsened. The disease was progressing faster than expected. We spent all our free time with her. Once, it was in December. Rosemary told us something I'll remember my whole life. She didn't regret giving us up for adoption. We grew up in wonderful families, became amazing women. But she regretted not insisting we not be separated. We should have grown up together. That day she showed us the last thing she'd kept. Tiny hospital bracelets with our names. 2 pink bracelets. Baby girl Clark A and baby girl Clark D. That's what we were called in the hospital before adoption. Rosemary admitted she stole them. The nurse didn't notice. She wanted to have something that proved we were real, that she hadn't imagined us. Rosemary died peacefully in her sleep in January, exactly 1 year after we found each other. Many people attended the funeral. Our adoptive families, friends, colleagues, nursing home staff. Lisa and I walked behind the coffin, holding hands. We accompanied the woman who gave us life and spent her remaining life dreaming of our meeting on her final journey. On the headstone we engraved, Rosemary Clark, loving mother of 2 daughters. Her love reunited us. After the funeral, Lisa and I went through Rosemary's last belongings. In her nightstand, we found a diary she'd kept all the years after our birth. This diary contained entries about every birthday, reflections on what we might have become. Rosemary wrote her hopes and dreams about us there. September 15th, 1985. My girls are 6 today. I wonder if they've learned to read yet. Do they like ice cream? Do they remember each other in their dreams? September 1st, 1992. First day of middle school. Sarah and Lisa are probably nervous. I pray they find good friends, that teachers are kind to them. September 15th, 2004. 25 years old. My girls are grown women now. Are they married? Do I have grandchildren? God, how I want to see them. In the diary's last pages were entries that Rosemary wrote, like letters to us, but never sent. Reflections on what we might have become, hopes for the future. Dozens of entries, over 45 years. In one entry, Rosemary wrote, I wonder what my girls grew up to be. Did they become kind people? Are they happy? I pray every day that life has been good to them. I wish I could hug them and tell them how proud I am, even though I don't know who they became. It's been 2 years since our reunion now. Our lives have completely intertwined. We spend all holidays together, vacations together, support each other through all difficulties. Emily and Jessica enrolled in the same college. Our husbands became best friends. We bought houses in the same neighborhood to be closer to each other. But the most amazing thing is how naturally we fit into each other's lives. We didn't try to make up for the lost 45 years. Instead, we simply began living as sisters who had always been close. We developed some kind of telepathic contact. Lisa calls me exactly when I'm feeling bad. I show up at her house with soup when she's sick, though she hasn't told anyone she's not feeling well. Last week, something happened that finally convinced me how deep our connection runs. Lisa was in a minor accident. Nothing serious, just a collision in a supermarket parking lot. But she hit her head and lost consciousness for a few minutes. At that moment, I was teaching my class. Suddenly, I felt severe head pain and dizziness. The pain was so sharp that I had to sit down and ask the principal to replace me. I didn't know what had happened to Lisa until she called me from the hospital 2 hours later. When we compared timing, it turned out I felt the pain exactly when Lisa lost consciousness. Doctors say it's a coincidence, but we know better. 45 years of separation couldn't break the bond that formed in our mother's womb. Sometimes we sit on Lisa's porch, drink coffee, and stay quiet. We don't need words. We just enjoy each other's presence. That feeling of completeness we'd lacked our whole lives. Recently, we decided to write a book about our story. We want other separated families to know it's never too late to find each other. Modern technology makes the impossible possible. We also started working with adoption agencies, telling them our story. Now they try not to separate twins. Our case changed the policy of several agencies in Ohio. Every year on September 15th, our birthday, we meet at Michael's grave in Los Angeles. We bring flowers, tell him about the past year, about our children, about future plans. Then we go to Rosemary's grave in Akron and do the same. This year, Emily and Jessica are finishing school. They both want to study genetics in college. They say our story inspired them to study heredity and family connections. Emily told me last week that if it weren't for DNA tests, we would never have met. Technology returned to our family what was lost. She's right. A simple test that cost less than $100 reunited a family separated 45 years ago. But you know what's most amazing? That strange feeling of incompleteness that haunted me my whole life has completely disappeared. For the first time in my life, I feel whole. Like a puzzle I'd been trying to solve my entire life finally came together. We often think about what our lives would have been like if we'd grown up together. Would we have gone to the same school, played the same games, shared secrets? But then we realize each of us received something unique from our adoptive families. I received calm and stability from small-town parents. Lisa received city smarts and independence. We became who we are now, thanks to our adoptive families. And now we can share these qualities with each other. Now, 2 years after our reunion, I can say one thing. Family isn't just genes or blood. Family is love, support, understanding. My adoptive parents will always be my real family because they raised me and loved me. But there's something special about looking into the face of someone who has your same eyes, your same smile, your same strange habits. There's something magical about knowing you're not alone in this world, that there's someone who understands you without words. Every morning I wake up knowing that somewhere, a few miles away, a woman is waking up who thinks the same thoughts, feels the same emotions, dreams the same dreams. And for the first time in my life, I feel truly at home. If you're an adopted child thinking about finding your biological family, don't be afraid. Maybe there's not just the story of your origins waiting, but people who've dreamed of meeting you their whole lives. And if you're simply considering a DNA test out of curiosity, remember, sometimes curiosity can change your entire life. That little tube of saliva might be the key to secrets you never suspected. My story began with a Christmas gift from my daughter and ended with the reunion of a family separated almost half a century ago. Your story might be completely different, but no less amazing. Remember, there are 7.5 billion people in the world, but sometimes the most important one lives just 20 miles away, and you simply don't know they exist. Until that day in January when I received my DNA test results, I thought I knew my story. 45 years of life, seemingly everything clear and understandable. But it turned out I only knew half the truth. Now, with all puzzle pieces in their places, I understand. My real life began the day I met Lisa in that cafe. All the previous years were just preparation for that moment. And that strange feeling of incompleteness that haunted me my whole life, it disappeared forever the moment we hugged by the bedside of our dying mother, who had dreamed for 45 years of seeing us together. Now I know I was never alone. I always had a sister, a reflection of my soul, a heart that beat in unison with mine. It just took 45 years and one DNA test to realize it. And now, when I go to sleep, I no longer feel like someone should be next to me. Because I know, 20 miles away, my sister is falling asleep, and we're both finally home.